Well, grab your asbestos underwear. Today we're going to talk about derelict postmodern Christian clergy. And, so it hit the news that President Trump, of course, had his prayer service at the National Cathedral, which is an Episcopalian church. It seems sort of funny to me, actually, that they still carry that custom. They should probably rotate it through a number of Christian denominations, or perhaps have it the church of the president, whatever denomination the president belongs to. But they had this occasion to have this horrible excuse for Christian clergy. There's so many different levels I can go at this particular individual, but let's putting all her supposed qualification or whatever aside, or lack thereof, just the complete out of placeness of that event. If I was asked to give a prayer, some sort of worship, I imagine these things are somewhat generic. Traditional Catholics, normally we offer a traditional mass, but in a case of a mixed audience where you have a lot of really a lot of people that are not necessarily Christian of our faith, and a more appropriate prayer service would probably be one of the hours of the divine office, or some sort of extra mass kind of prayer service, and maybe using psalms and just prayers for the good of the country and the like. And if there was a sermon, great. But here's the thing. Now, I'm traditional and I lean conservative. And if I was asked to give, some sort of prayer service with Joe Biden or Barack Obama or Jimmy Carter or Nancy Pelosi or one of these sort of public political liberals, I would not. And I have again, I'm not shy about bringing up political issues, in the church context, because the fact of the matter is it's applied faith. We interface in the world, we interface the society through our political, socio-political world. But I would never, as over the top as I can be, I would never be disrespectful to those people in these offices in that context. Like if they come to my church, if they come to my church and they're attending one of my masses or something like that, and they happen to get a blast, well, that's a very different thing. But this prayer service was intended to be sort of a semi-ecumenical thing that was supposed to pray for the success of the president's ministry or his term. And it was completely inappropriate to put one's political agenda on there, as if, the arrogance of putting him in this sort of this captive audience situation. And he was more gracious than I would have been, because I would have got up, I would have made a rude gesture, and I would have walked out. And that's me, right? That's right. I make no apology for it, Felix, because that, first of all, I wouldn't be in the presence of that, hellborn harpy to begin with. But even if I was faced with that bull, I'd just get up and walk out. I've walked out of churches. I've been walking out of churches for years. So as a lay person, well before ordination, one day I went to a Catholic mass, and the priest gets up one day and he says, I don't really feel like a penitential rite today. This is Novus Ordo, right? But you didn't even do a good Novus Ordo. I don't feel like a penitential rite today. I want you to look at the nearest stranger and hug them. Right? So I just got up and walked out. And as I went out, I said to the person I was with, I said, "Hey, gee, I wonder what time mass is at the cathedral." Like that was the other nearest church. and I have absolutely no problem walking out of churches when the clergy is derelict in their duty and deficient, obviously, in their training, and just shameful. And when you guys find out what I'm about to tell you about some of the stuff, like the backstory of this, you're just going to be like, you can't make this stuff up. You cannot make it up. So let's roll. Let's first of all hear what she said. I abbreviated it a little bit because we don't need to listen. I mean, I don't want witches to come flying to the windows or anything, so we're not going to play the whole clip, but play clip one.
No, right? All right. So I think this is the one. Just by looking at it.
Let me make one final plea, Mr. President. Millions have put their trust in you. And as you told the nation yesterday, you have felt the providential hand of a loving God. In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. There are
well, she should be scared, but not for the reason she thinks.
Right.
Democratic, Republican, and independent.
There's a couple reasons that I would be scared if I was in her place.
Some who fear for their lives. And the people who pick our crops and clean our office buildings, who labor in poultry farms and meat packing plants.
So, Phil, just pause that for a second. Do you find anything kind of racist about this?
Oh yeah, who's gonna scrub our toilets? Who's gonna?
Yeah.
yeah. This is them revealing themselves. You know, like it's like they're always accusing us of what it is that they are actually doing, and it's going over their head. They don't realize this.
No, totally not. They think they're this great defender, right? And it's like they have no understanding. Like I mean, some of our viewers are going to wonder, why is Bishop Meikle and Felix so growly at this poor woman just trying to get her point across? Well, it's because first of all, she's defiling the whole moment, that what the whole purpose of this event is, and second of all, she's boring, right? Which is Trump's response was, he was just like, it was just boring, it was horrible, right? Because we've all heard this before. There's nothing new. There is nothing new. She's a simple rewarmed pablum of postmodern clergy, male or female, and it doesn't matter whether they're Catholic or Episcopalian or Lutheran or whatever, the great spaghetti monster, whatever deity these people believe in. Right. But they make it all about social justice in their conception, in their postmodern Marxist frame. There's no connection to what the gospel teaches, what the New Testament teaches, what the Old Testament teaches, what Thomas Aquinas teaches, what Augustine teaches. There's no connection at all. They just clip these things out of context, and it's like this school marmy shrieking kind of like Karen, like, I'm going to tell you what a Christian is. Meanwhile, I'm not even sure we share the same number of persons in our Trinity. Like, I really do not know whether we believe in the same deity. So that's how far I am away from this individual. And you can play the rest of it there, Felix. This isn't too long, I don't think.
Who wash the dishes after we eat in restaurants and work the night shifts in hospitals. They may not be citizens or have the proper documentation.
So that, in other words, they're criminals, right, lady? They're criminals.
Criminals.
They're not criminals, you say. So she's now going to pronounce on the secular law. So that was weird. And then if you look at the second clip, so clip two.
Okay.
Yeah. She went on all these talk shows. She went on like 6-7 different talk shows. Let her play again. Sorry. Is it? Yeah.
My responsibility yesterday morning, was to reflect, to pray with the nation for unity. And as I was pondering what are the foundations of unity, I want.
So Felix, was she successful in achieving unity?
Oh no.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, that was probably like one of the biggest fails. If that was her, her attempt.
There is a way, you know what? Like again, I can argue both sides of. It's a good exercise. If you guys don't already do this is something you should try doing. Like if you're opinionated, like I'm opinionated, but in my defense, like you guys can disagree with me, and as long as you treat me respectfully, I'm going to treat you respectfully. And I don't mind when people disagree with me. What I mind, I do mind when there's disrespect involved, right? And I'm being a little disrespectful to her here, but like I say, it was not unprovoked. So, but the thing is that. One-on-one, for example, I mean, she can have these views and I'm going to disagree with her and she's going to disagree with me. But where I get angry, I get very, very angry is when it's just total BS. She later on, I don't know if it's in this clip or not, accuses Trump of being divisive and all this kind of stuff. What on earth did her mouth spew out? What kind of green slime, steaming bag of like haggis clad sulfur came out of this woman's mouth in a supposed house of God? Although again, I have no idea what deity this particular church believes in. I'd be very suspect that it's the same one that I do. And has the audacity to basically commit the very offense she accuses others of doing. So let it roll again. I'm pretty sure this is a short one.
Sure.
I wanted to emphasize respecting the honor and dignity of every human being, basic honesty and humility. And then I also realized that that unity requires a certain degree of mercy. Mercy.
Yeah, we're really seeing that, lady. That mercy. Wow. If she gets any more merciful, Felix, my goodness, I don't know what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And so anyway, it's just, so I want to explain something that maybe you guys haven't realized. So there's two major, like there's a big anthropological shift that's going on in the US. And part of the reason why I call this little channel The New Epoch, and again, I'm sorry, I'm about a year behind getting like the regular videos out of what I'm intending. I'm trying to get a proper, schedule a release. And once I get going, I want it to be consistent, and that'll augment. We won't replace Felix and I, but it'll augment. But the whole reason for naming the channel this way is because we are at the brink of a chapter change. And there's a number of different layers to that. There's the way, people look at their faith. There's the way people look at their nation. There's the way that people are going to look at finance, the way people are going to look at the nature of work, the way that people look at the nature of family and of citizenship. And with the rise of AI, there's a whole bunch of things coming down the pike, and it's all hitting at once. So I sort of put a catch-all I just call, cultural anthropology. So when I say anthropology, what I really mean, of course, it's a study of man and a study of culture. But when I say it, I mean basically how our social psychology is applied, how our practical theology is applied, how is applied, and how is our culture, how does it evolve, and what sort of do we value as a culture? And all of that is going to turn quite a bit. And one of the things that President Trump has gotten in trouble with our Mexican friends and our Canadian friends is he's got a lot of people very angry at him. He's got Canadians feeling very nationalistic for the first time, I think, since World War II. I mean, it's actually quite interesting to see. I don't know whether I should be happy for them or upset with them or what, because they've been booing the U.S. national anthem and things like this because they perceive that they're going to be, annexed. And it's not as simple as that. And I don't want to get down that rabbit hole today, but I just find it interesting because, I realize, like, looking at this clip and listening to some of these Canadians going, not everybody's ready for the shift. Not everybody's going to be capable. And then unfortunately, we can't wait around for them. So, this whole postmodern thing. So there's it's not right or left anymore. It's not Democrat versus Republican, right? It is a different way of thinking as far as how the global world order versus a North American order works. And with that comes a change in Christianity, that basically liberal Christianity is dying. It's really dying. And then traditional Christianity of various forms are growing, but they're in small little remnant segments. And then you've got sort of this middle malaise, which I don't know what's going to happen. It'll either be part of a rebirth or more likely will just become sort of a MIC religion, some sort of consumer morphing. And those who are really serious about the faith are going to be viewed as fundamentalist wingnuts, right-wing conspiracy theorists and all this business. And where, you get called these names all the time if you just simply believe. So
then you realize that's the cool table.
Again, depending on your worldview, right? Like, if you like the old faith, sure. I mean, I try to be Big Tent. Like I'm growly at this lady, right? Like I'm really growly, but it's almost like PTSD with me, right? Because it's like theological schools, seminaries have people just like her teaching in them. And there's a reason why the Bible says what it says about female theology teachers, right? So I'm going to get myself in trouble with that. But it's the exception. It's the exception that proves the rule. And they all have a certain type. and they all have the same grievance, and they all have the same whingy address and understanding of Christianity. And it's really just Marxism with some religious art slapped over it. And it's ridiculous, because instead of being on board with the mission, there was no concern over the victims of the crimes and the rapes and the home invasions and all of the stuff that happened with this gang invasion. There was no concern over the military age Chinese crossing the border. There was no, all they care about. And we're going to get into why. We're going to get into why, because it's not because they're so altruistic and they're all so holier than Felix and myself and our viewers. You just wait
Right.
till you find out what's going on. Okay, so the next clip, Felix.
Okay, this will be, I guess, clip 3.
Clip 3.
Why is it not letting me?
I don't know.
There it is. No, I got it. That was my fault.
Well, in my
Okay.
opinion, a lot of the prayer yesterday was kind of partisan screed, and it wasn't prayer at all. It was histrionic performance, with the exception.
Okay.
So this guy is what we call a Novus Ordo Catholic, but he's just like that female Episcopalian bishop. He's the same. He's cut of the same cloth, right? It doesn't matter that these guys are Catholic or Baptist or Presbyterian or Episcopalian. The difference in this kind of commentary is whether they're postmodern or classical, postmodern or traditional. So this
Right.
individual, you just listen what he goes on, and you're going to see exactly what I'm getting at, because this is supposedly a Catholic.
Let me run it back, actually. I want to hear it again.
Sure.
All right.
We heard yesterday. We heard yesterday.
Well, in my opinion, a lot of the prayer yesterday was kind of partisan screed, and it wasn't prayer at all. It was histrionic performance.
He's referring to the
with
day
the exception
before.
of Cardinal Dolan,
Oh.
who I thought began very well, and also graciously mentioned President Biden.
Wait.
So let's get this straight, Felix.
Let me get you on
Let's
there.
get
Oh,
this-
okay.
Let's get this straight. So this guy, he gets on CNN. He's known as a public liberal Roman Catholic priest. He gets on there, and what does he say? He founds all the other Protestant prayers that pray for the success of Trump's mission to be
Like dribble.
histrionical
Yeah.
screed, right? Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
these people are so freaking arrogant.
Clueless.
They are so frigging contemptible. Pardon my language. I'm just so upset at this guy. So the thing is that he gets up there and he totally craps on the people that he disagrees with, not because he disagrees with them in faith, but because he disagrees with them in politics. All right. So the thing is, that's point one. The second point, he mentions that they invoke the name of a president that was pro-abortion, right? And he's saying that this is a good thing. And he's supposedly a Roman Catholic priest. And then on top of that, so then he says that, and then he pulls in Cardinal Dolan. Now, you guys can fact check me on this, okay? Because I will admit I did not. I would hope to. I ran a little behind today. I was going to fact check myself, but you guys can fact check me on this. My understanding is that Cardinal Dolan got up there, and when he prayed, he didn't mention the holy name of our Lord once. He didn't invoke our Lord once. So if that's true, and again, there's a small percent chance that it isn't, because again, I didn't watch the primary source, but I can so see it. And so we've got this priest praising both Biden and a Catholic priest who doesn't use the holy name or mention our Lord at all.
All right. You
Yeah,
want me
so
to
Victor,
let me know when you're
Victor
ready?
is right. Victor is right. There is forgiveness, Victor, if people ask for it. So if
Yeah.
there's repentance, yes, God can forgive it. You know, and it is something to say. I'm going to get in trouble with some of our more harder core conservative or traditionals with this, because you know some of
Really?
them, like, they don't like the following phrase that I think Victor would agree with me, and that the mother is too in a way a victim, right? Why? Because the first of all, a lot of women do not understand truly what they're doing. They
Well-
talk themselves in. We rationalize all kinds of things, and there's a lot of pressure, and there's a lot of confusion, and there's a lot of raging neurotransmitters going around in their brain with the right kind of stress.
Sure.
And so, murder is murder, and this is one of the worst murders that there can be because it's the killing of an innocent. But that said, if there is some sort of psychological or spiritual mitigation, God understands that. And I certainly want women who have been down that road to understand that there is forgiveness. With true repentance,
Yeah.
there is forgiveness. But
Absolutely.
where I differ with some other religious traditions that might be watching is that like if you don't ask for it and you don't have true repentance, then God can't save us against our will, right? So
Right.
that's that's where I differ with some. And again, we can agree to disagree depending on your theological tradition. You might have a different take on that, but that's the big thing. So basically, like what I like to say to people is that the invitation to salvation is there equally to all, but but it's not like everyone's saved, and it's not like everyone who just says Lord, Lord will enter the kingdom of heaven, but he that does the will of the Father. So that's what Scripture teaches. That's what the church taught, and that's what we believe. But I get angry when clergy are derelict because I fear God, and I try to the best of my ability to live my life in a manner that's pleasing to Him, knowing that at any moment my end could come. So I don't. I take this stuff very seriously, and I get angry at clergy the same way I would if a doctor abused a patient or a lawyer used confidential information to enrich himself at his client's expense. When I see clergy that try to accommodate the world to gain worldly acceptance and accolade and go on 6-7 different talk shows to talk about how they basically scolded the president, well, good for you. You're lucky. Like I say, he's a lot more gracious than I would be. A lot more gracious than I would be. I don't know if they have an annual thing or is this just an inauguration, but if they have an annual thing, I hope he moves it to someplace else. And, so it's absolutely ridiculous. And lesson learned, folks. If you're a conservative, don't allow liberal or postmodern clergy anywhere near any of your events. I joke. So you guys give me a little leash with this, okay? Because I have a weird sense of humor. But my joke is, if you want the Church of Inclusion, there's one right up the road. And I said I'm all about the sheep and goats. Now that's why I say give me a little leash because no, the invitation. I want people to repent. I want people to come to our Lord. I don't want to have a single soul lost that can be saved. But the reason why I'm blunt like that is because it's just a counter reaction to this constant going on about inclusion. And that's not really what the gospel teaches. The gospel teaches is an equality of invitation, but not, it treats the villages that rejected the apostles very differently. Wipe the dust off your feet. It treats the Pharisees very differently, the ones that are stubborn of heart. It teaches the rich young man, which is a fascinating story. If you read it carefully, you realize the rich young man, he answered all the questions right. And if he had stopped pushing Jesus, he could have, but it was like, Master, what can I do more? Right. And then he got himself into trouble and then he went away sad. So it's a good story to read that slowly. And,
what I would say, just to throw this in there, like people who, I can't, I totally lost my thought. Forget, I had it ready to go. And then bada bing, bada boom. I'm sorry. Finish what you were saying.
I mean, and it's not like we're without compassion for people that find themselves in difficult spots. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if some of the people that are undocumented or illegal or whatever were like kidnapped and just hauled up for slave labor or something. I mean, if that stuff happens, like, obviously that's very different than some criminal plotting to come across the border and open up a illegal business, right? So it's not like everybody's situation is completely the same, and it's not like we're without compassion for people that truly find themselves in a situation without their fault, or mostly not their fault. But the problem is that the church is always taught, Christianity is always taught, you take care of the believers, you take care of your family, right? And so the problem is that postmodern churches, they always favor the so-called marginalized over the existing members, and that's just not right. That's against what the scripture teaches. It's against what St. Thomas Aquinas teaches. There's a hierarchy of of where you put your resources and care. And the problem is that postmoderns, they want, I don't know. I mean, again, there's conspiracy. It could be conspiracy theory, or it could just be a hypothesis, I guess. But there's this notion that maybe they want to collapse the whole system, and so that they can sort of reinvent it as some sort of Marxist utopia. I don't know if that's true, or whether that's all tinfoil hat. But what I can say is that whatever their motivation, it's not to take care of the existing, and that's a real problem. And there's not a sense of, and they go on about unity, but they don't want unity in truth. They want unity in, postmodern Marxism, which is just a recipe for spiritual and physical death, literally. Assisted suicide, rampant drug use, intentional sterility. I mean, these are not things that a society that's healthy engages in. It's almost like a neo-Cartharism, but I don't want to get down on that rabbit hole too much. But
I remember my thought. I was going to say, I say that almost by point of virtue, even though this is not what the church is doing, by default, and I would kind of make this argument, is that the church is actually more inclusive, without having to pat itself on the back for it, because that's not what it's asking for, is inclusivity, or that's not what it's promoting, or so much.
Well, it depends on what you mean by inclusivity, right? Like, I mean, so the thing is, in certain contexts, yes, of course the church is inclusive.
In certain contexts, correct.
They use it as a buzzword, and what they mean isn't. Now, I'm going to just go over here. I'm stealing Felix's job.
Oh, nice. Right. Okay. Oh, wow. Right. Oh, interesting. Okay, here we go.
Here we got to go back here. All right.
And actually, I would say, just in comparison to these other groups, because after a while, it's like you hear this, the left eventually starts eating itself. It's eating its own tail. So even within the people that agree amongst each other, eventually it becomes it really becomes more cutthroat. Like, oh, well, you think blacks should have equal rights, but not gay people and not trans, and then it goes all over the place.
So the easy thing to do is to treat everybody the same, like under the constitutional rights, and the thing about the Constitution is that for the most part it reflects natural law rights. So that means it's compatible with Christianity. It's that's part of the reason why it works, even though the Constitution is more or less a secular document. I mean, again, people debate about that. But I thought this was interesting. So there's an excellent website, sort of like an online magazine, called Complicit Clergy. They're very good. They expose a lot of shenanigans going on in the various, I believe it's mostly Catholic churches, but I think they, so here's what they ask. This is sort of their editorial thing. Is it time to start arresting some of these bishops? I say yes. If you're complicit in human trafficking, and if you're part of like one of these postmodern harpies that are grifting and stealing from the American people to encourage others to break the law, then, you shouldn't be free. There should be
not to mention all the hall passes that a lot of these special bishops and priests were able to get, that was to do really despicable things. But I guess that's that goes without saying. But
yeah, no, I mean, you're right on. Like, there's a lot of dark here, and you'd think that these idiots would have learned something from the scandals from the 90s on forward, and they still haven't learned, and they do this stuff. And what's worse is that they're bought and paid for. Like, if you wonder why all the churches closed during COVID, they're bought and paid for. He who pays the piper calls the tune. So it's an interesting thing. And here's an Italian take on it. And the problem is that the Vatican is in bed with Democrat-run globalism. It is. It's across the board. If you look at Europe, the ones that are involved in the World Economic Gathering,
yes, good catch,
right? The thing is that I mean, the 21st century Vatican is 100% behind this, or behind this program, and nothing sort of captured the theme more than when Francis, on the island of Lesbos, you can't make this up, that's the island he was on, he kicked off Christian families to make room for Muslim families. What about those children? And then someone's been putting, I didn't have a slide on this, but it's been circulating Catholic Twitter that the Vatican just tightened up its illegal immigration law. So if you're trying to sneak into the Vatican and live there, there's very strict rules about what's going to happen to you. But of course, they lecture other countries about their immigration laws. So it's kind of interesting. And then here's what I wanted to get at. We have another clip. We're going to play a longer clip. We'll pause it a couple times, talk about it. But this is what I want you guys to realize. So this is all a scam. She's not up there preaching the gospel. She's not out there for zeal for souls. She could care less about Trump. So we're going to see in a clip I'm going to show you a pastor that was sitting with the Trump family watching this abomination.
Yeah.
Said that she didn't even go to the president, or just didn't even look at him. There's no interest in his soul. She was interested in going on The View. She was interested in going on a little television circuit so she can virtue signal to a bunch of obese Marxists who are happy to tell you to redistribute your wealth, but they don't do a lot of redistribution themselves now, do they? So,
right.
Yeah, 53 million, and it's billions for the Catholic Church. But yeah, the Episcopalians here. So there's big money involved, folks. And they're not happy. USAID, of course, is all hitting the news. And that's pretty wild. And why don't we? And we're going to pause this sometime.
Actually disappointing. For example,
okay, let me
yesterday at the National Prayer Service, the bishop was extreme in her views, extremely out of line and out of touch. And what she did was uncalled for. Perhaps we should pray for her. Why should anyone block or be opposed to President Trump's agenda? The American people expect us to deliver on the mandate in which they've given us. The days of negativity are over. That's why President Trump and House Republicans have already started to keep our promises. Promises to secure the border and unleash American energy and drain the swamp. Promises made.
Now, I just wanted to say, you realize Trump can't win on either point here. You look at the headline. Trump is actually, this is what upsets traditional Christians. Trump actually is very much in support of a number. He made a number of LG, at least LGB. I don't think there's any T's, but there's LGB in his whole program, right?
I remember in 2016, he definitely, celebrated the fact that he was being supported by the LGBTQ plus. He got all the letters down, and I was like, but yeah, there are plenty that do support him, that are, and again, from a secular point of view, obviously, pray for their souls. I'm not advocating for behavior or anything, but there are some more level-headed than others. You know what I mean?
Well, what I'm getting at, Felix, is that you can say that he's an enemy of various groups or whatever, but that just, it's not really fair to say that he's, like, what I'm saying is, if he's getting criticism from traditional Christians on his approach to LGB,
right,
then, you know what I'm saying, he can't be doing all these things against him. Now, I think it is fair to say he's not very pro-T.
Oh no, I think there's been a flip on the T on the T portion, not just from Trump, but I think from the country as a whole.
Well, what I found interesting, again, I don't want to get down this rabbit hole, but there was people of the LGB community that were waking up to the fact that the T was trying to convert all these kids to T, and therefore the ones that they thought should be LGB were, it was a lot of internal fighting. And I guess most of our sane ones, doesn't matter what your preferences are. I think most sane people would say, just leave the kids alone. Leave the kids alone. Can you let adults make adult decisions? And, that's, to me, that's just the most common sense thing we could say.
There are two demons fighting over their franchise,
I'm going to whip through this. This guy He basically said what I pointed out. He exposed that he found out they're bought and paid for.
Okay, all right.
From the American government for immigration resettlement.
Anyway, over the last 48 hours, I have been proved right about this high priestess, Edgar Allan, whatever her name is, Buddy, right? I've been proved absolutely right because she's now doing the rounds all over every talk show that'll have her, which I find very ungodlike. This sister's clearly been reading her Bible wrong.
And what was so sad about this bishop, she had the opportunity to preach the gospel. She had the opportunity to talk about the death, the burial, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. She had the opportunity to bring people into the faith. It was a salvific moment. Instead of using the authority of the Word of God to preach the message of Christ and to draw our president closer to Jesus, she used it to practice what I call theological and spiritual malpractice. She is the worst preacher I have ever in my life heard. It was awful. It was so bad. I'm grateful my wife was not there. She would have ran out of that church. I could not believe that she would use that moment to speak a demonic message as if she was using the Bible. She used her platform to practice theological malpractice. It was horrible. It was the worst message.
Did she come up afterward and shake their hands? Like, how did that go down? Well, I didn't see any of the aftermath of that.
She was so arrogant. The way she didn't even acknowledge the president of the United States of America. She had an opportunity to minister the gospel. Instead of that, she is a heretic.
Now, watch this. This is our bishop. Listen to the bishop here. Darth Vader and her are having a race.
Oh, she's doing the meme.
In the church. Darth Vader and
She used her sermon to treat us like vermin. Our video of the day comes from the National Prayer Service, where Episcopalian Bishop Marianne Buddy used her priestly pulpit to lecture Trump about the evils of his new administration. But if she wants to push lefty talking points from the pulpit, just wait a few weeks. Save it for Joe Biden's eulogy. We're all going to die. Jamie, so trans kids are in danger. I don't think any of them were shot in the head like the person she is basically admonishing.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was confused at a lot of stuff. She was like, I had a one-on-one conversation with him and everybody. There's like a time and a place for something like that, right? There's a time and a place, two things Biden's never sure of. But I just felt like it was for sure an inappropriate time to do something like that. And if nothing else, kind of confusing and kind of.
So.
I got you.
Yeah, you got me. Thanks. Yeah. So, I mean, that picture of her racing with Darth Vader, that was classic. This is so postmodern Christian, right? Like they use the house of God. Like, again, let's put aside our differences between Episcopalians and Catholics and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But they use, a house of worship to play around with Star Wars characters, and
they did that in the building. Can I ask you something? Like, is there a place where that's acceptable? I guess, I mean, like Holy Grail. This is where we get into Monty Python and Holy Grail,
right?
But because they're not in a church. I don't know.
She was in a church. Yeah, so
she was in a church
there. And I mean, it boils down to, if this is the contempt that she has for the Christian faith, then, I mean, but that's so typical. Like, all these postmoderns, they just hate God. They create this new God. And, I don't say that every liberal does, because I have liberal clergy friends that believe and they're sincere, and we just agree to disagree. But they don't have contempt, right? They don't have contempt,
right,
for the faith. They just believe that, the Holy Spirit wants us to change this and this and this. And then the argument, for those of you who don't realize, is that, like, traditional clergy were going to say, well, God's immutable. He's outside time. You can't change anything serious, right? Like, you can change the color of the cassock, or you change the style of my cross, and you can change what my acceptable haircut's allowed to be. but you can't change things like persons in the Trinity or what we consider reverence in the church. Like, I mean, as far as, in a Catholic context, the real presence and the like. So it's just very, very frustrating that we see this. And I'm glad I found that clip, from her own church, that this is the kind of crap that she does. And it's just, there's no credibility whatsoever. There are serious liberals. And you know what? To the point that Greg Gutfield's guest made, there is an appropriate forum to say what she said. It's not that her message, like, I disagree with her message, don't get me wrong. But if she truly believes that God doesn't, want President Trump to do X, Y, Z, it's perfectly fine for her to, rebuke him in a Christian manner. And how that would go is privately.
Yeah.
And then if he didn't treat her well, or like, if he just treated her like crap or something, then sure, she could go public. There would be a legitimate reason to do it, right? She said, "Hey, I tried to rebuke him in private, and he disrespected the message, and then maybe you could escalate it." But I think it's just so blatant that she just wanted to go on Rachel Maddow and Joy Behar and all this stuff, and it cheapened everything, and it splatters all Christian clergy to a certain degree. Because again, it's one of the criticisms I sometimes have is that, they find that some of my message is a little bit divisive. But the thing is I'm just trying to wake people up. Is that we can't. The biggest battle we face right now is anthropological. If we lose the basic frame of how to build society, Western civilization has a certain foundation. If we lose this, it's gonna be bad for everybody, including liberals. But unfortunately, the liberals don't understand that they can only sort of be liberal or progressive or whatever. It only kind of works because they have the frame that everybody else is set, or tradition is set. And they're so zealous in trying to destroy all this, they're going to blow themselves up. So it's as stupid as trying to say, I'm going to blow up the first 2 floors of a skyscraper and it's okay because I'm on the 20th floor. No, you're an idiot. The whole building is going to come down.
Right. So right? Father, can I ask you something?
Sure.
As far as, if we could peek behind the scenes of the situation, like, what did Trump pick this person to give the mass or the service, or the ins and outs of how this happened, and like who thought this was a good idea, and then who thought it was a good idea to approve it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So my understanding, and again, I'm open to fact check. So if any of our audience knows it to be different, I'll defer to you because I'm just going with what my understanding is. My understanding is that this is a custom that the Episcopalian Church. So for those of you who don't know the history, so there was a break with Henry VIII with the Anglicans in England. So the Anglican Church broke from the Catholic Church. And it's called, I don't want to get too far down a rabbit hole.
Sure.
But there's a school of thought that just that some of them just consider themselves still the same kind of beliefs, but they want to be a national church. All right. So so again, I'm simplifying it. So give me some leash. If you're Anglican or Episcopalian, don't get mad at me. I'm just trying to simplify it for those who aren't in that tradition. So what happens is essentially, in the U.S., Anglicanism is called Episcopalian because they didn't want to be Anglican. They're against the British, right? So Anglo means English.
Yeah.
So it gets complicated because there is an Anglican church in the United States right now, but that's kind of like the conservative or the traditional version of the Episcopalians.
Wow.
But the Episcopalians are the liberals of this iteration, and so that's why they have female clergy. So they it's kind of the closest thing the U.S. has to a sort of an official religion, in the sense that if you had to have one that was sort of symbolic, because it's a national iteration of ancient Christianity, a derivative of it, right? So that would be the argument for it. And I think that the argument probably would be, and also my understanding is they have this in a historic church right by the White House. And so there's just tradition that goes with it. But what I would say is that, okay, well, if we're going to host this, then, one or two things happen. Either the either the Episcopalian should agree to have other clergy use that church for this purpose,
Right.
or if they insist on using their own clergy, it should be somebody that, just like Trump rejected Great Britain's ambassador because the person was very anti-Trump, and president said no, pick somebody else.
Right.
It's the same kind of thing. It's like basically the White House staff should have vetted this better. I don't know if someone's going to have their heels together in front of their chief of staff or not, but it's one of these things. You could have called, like that pastor that was sitting with the Trump family that was on Fox there that was explaining to Laura Ingraham, or someone like me, not me, because I'm not, important or whatever, but what I'm getting at is someone like me, right? Like, I just, in the sense of, I could tell you whether, like, I could interview the clergy and know what was coming up, and you give them their expectations. It's like, this is not your time to prattle on. And by all means, that doesn't mean you have to be sycophantic to the president either. You can keep it very generic. I like what that pastor said. Basically, this is your opportunity. Like, if she wanted to be sort of preachy, she just had to stick to, live up to your obligations of the first commandment and to love your neighbor as yourself. Yeah. Like, she could have done it without making it like, she would have made a statement.
It just looks so obvious.
Without. But see, like I say, she was all after the going on the View and all this other stuff, and that's all. I mean, that's all it was about because of how she treated the president after her little event.
I'll say, well, you know what? If anything, let's have Father Meikle do the reading when Barron Trump does his first when he does his first term.
That's right. If he gets named president, you make sure if anyone's friend is Barron, you tell him I'll do the sermon. But the thing is, you don't want to be sycophantic. You don't want to be like kissing the president's rump, right? But on the other side, and you want to hopefully give him a message of encouragement from God. And you know what? She started off okay. Like she invoked the fact that he gave God the credit for surviving the shooting, right? So she could have worked that in just a little bit more tactful way and conveyed her message that, she just hopes that he's, he brings the compassion. One of the things that she could have had, and I just think she's a horrible human being. I'm going to tell you that right now. I do not think this individual is a good person at all. Wow. And I don't say that about many people. I say that maybe there's like, how many thousands of people do I know, right? And I say that about, 10 people. She's one of them. And I do not think she's a good person. Because if she was really concerned about the people she says she is, and if she was really concerned about the president's soul, she would do her homework, and she would realize that one of the things that President Trump is known for anyone who knows him, and there's a nice story. Greg Gutfield's, one of his co-hosts or panelists is this Tyrus, the wrestler guy, right?
Yeah.
And Tyrus wasn't a big Trump supporter, but what happened is that he had some sort of interview or whatever, and Trump encountered one of Tyrus's children. And apparently Trump spent 20 minutes, 30 minutes just talking what the kid wanted to talk about. And the interaction observed by the dad was, holy crap, this guy's a real family guy.
That's awesome. Yeah, right.
Right. And so this is what I would, if I was liberal, saints preserve us, I'm not, but if I was liberal, that's exactly what I would do. I would go at the heartstrings. I would link the first commandment to his love of family. And I'll tell you, this is something, if you never thought about this, about President Trump, you don't have to agree with him. You don't have to like him. I'm just asking you to consider this frame. He puts family first. And for some weird reason, he considers the ordinary American person sort of part of his extended family. He sees his family being taken advantage of, and he's acting like the family patriarch here. And that's why it's triggering all these postmoderns, because they don't like patriarchy. But he's got the classical model of it. I sometimes tease and I call him a pseudo Constantine. It's interesting. And then someone said, no, he's more like this, whatever. But I mean, you see what I'm saying? Like, Constantine was a fallen character. Constantine was not a devout man. He died with baptism and the sacraments, but he delayed it because he just knew he was He knew how the sausage was made, and I think that's President Trump. I think he's pragmatic, which is not the path to holiness. Okay, pragmatism is not the path to holiness, but it's probably what a secular leader doing this particular job needs to be. And I think he really does care about the ordinary person. I think if there's any Canadians watching here, okay, trigger warning, all right? I think that he cares more about the ordinary Canadian than most of their government officials. I sincerely believe that with my whole heart. And the thing is, they're all angry at him now, but they don't realize it was never against them. It was against Trudeau, and Trudeau capitulated. So, it's not going to hurt Canadians. But longer term, Canadians need help. They're not capable really of self-governance. I'm going to get flamed for this too. They're not. And I've offended so many people with this. But it's and people point out all the corruption in the U.S. Yes, you're right. But the difference is that the U.S. can pivot, man. The U.S. can pivot, and that's what happened. Like, who was I watching the other day? They pointed exactly this out. It's like we were on the wrong track, and all it took, like, it shifted. It shifted over in a week's period. Like, all of this woke stuff, it's all going in the trash bin. All of it. It's done. It's not coming back. And the Overton window moved like 30 points in the right direction. Right? That you cannot do that in any other Western country, I don't think. If you disagree with me, put it in the comments, because I don't think any culture can shift like that. And Americans, when they set their mind to do something, they do it. All these other countries, they're humming and hawing, and they'll have their committees and then all this bull. Americans just get it done. And sometimes that's a bad thing, because we, unfortunately, if we commit to something that's stupid, well, and guess what? We get to stupid faster too, right? But I mean, what other country can do what America can? And a lot of people like to think that it's a declining empire and whatever. But you know how you can compare it, Felix, is you just look at fertility rate. So you look at the fertility rate of all the various Western nations, and you see that, the U.S. has some work to do, but we're not a death cult like most European countries and Canada is. We're not putting people to sleep and not having kids and not being able to provide housing for the kids and grandkids that are there. The U.S. with a couple key changes can turn it all around for everybody, all the ordinary people. One of the things that can happen, when you think about it, what if you prohibited large corporate ownership of single residence homes? So all the BlackRock and all these guys have been buying up all the housing.
They have to sell it back.
Yep. Guess what? What would happen? Like, this could be done like in a week. So the thing is, the U.S., it's got its problems, but it also can fix its problems. And one of the things that the past couple of weeks, again, love or hate Trump, it doesn't matter whether you love or hate him. I'm looking at this, Felix. I'm exhausted watching what this guy does. He's like 20 years older than me, and I don't know where he gets the energy. The only thing I can think of is he must have had a lot of this work sort of pre-done in the past 4 years, because the volume and the stuff that Elon is discovering, and they're getting mad at him for simply just publishing where the money goes. And they're insulting him, and they're, they can't attack. And I had on a social media account, friends of mine that I've known for over 30 years come at me personally, not against the idea, totally triggered over this notion that, America's pivot and discovering all this corruption, and that how we could, in fact, enter a new golden age. Now, what might this mean for the spiritual life? I don't know. I'm looking at this, and I'm hoping that there's a great awakening amongst the people in terms of how we understand our lived Christianity as well, right? And that our churches can have a new golden age, and that we can set, once again, be primarily about the first commandment instead of recycling. And there's nothing wrong with recycling, but if your church's primary objective is taking care of migrants and recycling, you don't have a Christian church. You have something that's using the trappings of Christianity, but it's not teaching anything about your salvation or anything about the zeal for souls. And so that's the thing we've got to kind of change. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm very curious how this is going to evolve, because postmodern Christianity has really outed itself as being pretty useless and also on the take. They're all getting money from the bad guys.
Wow.
Do you object or do you agree, or what do you think, Felix?
No, I think you hit it 100%. I'm with you.
So
go on,
go ahead.
No, go on. I
was just going to say, no, I'm hopeful. I'm actually excited about all this stuff because there's a lot of good happening. I'm just a little disappointed that people are not able to think at 10,000 feet and 20,000 feet. That, when I'm looking at the Canadian reaction to Trump's attempt to help the ordinary Canadian person, and I'm sure Alberta's probably an exception, Saskatchewan's probably an exception, but I mean, there's a lot of people there that they don't understand that the status quo is their extinction. Yeah. And this is a lifeline. And instead they're biting the hand that feeds them. But you know what? If they're going to reject God, like there's hardly any Canadians that go to church percentage wise. If you're going to reject God, why would you accept any human help either? Right. So there is that.
Especially for one that believes in God. Yeah, no, I'm with you. And again, like, I think I brought up this last week too, as this lady showing up and doing the show, putting on the show. All it does, again, it's just a big, you point your finger at it like this is what's happening, and it's another moment where people that are on the fence, or even people that might be in deep, something clicks, moments like this. There was definitely opportunities here, especially for that service. Yeah, again, he survived the shots of that, and it's nice that she touched on it. But that gentleman in one of your clips is like, preach the gospel. Preach the gospel. You got like the whole country listening, and you can tie this into the gospel.
Well, that's what I'm saying. She didn't have to water down any of her issues. She just had to frame it better. And also, the thing is, this is what drives me nuts. They go on about us, our crowd being divisive, but they're the divisive ones, because at the end of the day, if you get a bunch of people of goodwill in the room, like make your case of why these people should remain. Give us some alternatives, work with us, meet us halfway.
Right.
And it's the same way with the church, like there's a real problem because there's not a real call to holiness in most postmodern Christian churches. There's lecturing, there's moralistic, there's virtue signaling, but there's no real program to try to instill some growth of virtue. So, in our defense, like Father Martin, for example, I haven't done a show with him in a little while. We're doing the Invitation to Christ, but, we have one of our priests, and he does the Introduction to the Devout Life and the Augustinian Charism and this kind of thing. I mean, this is the kind of work that you want to be exposing your people to so that they can have a life of holiness, right? And then here's the thing. You get your spiritual house in order, and you're going to be able to see at different altitude these other social problems, like the problem of migration and whatever, and you're going to come up with a way that respects all the stakeholders and tries to be as helpful as you can. But the problem remains. You cannot punish the people that waited on a list for 8 years and let just some ordinary person just skip the line. There's got to be a real reason in extremis that they should be allowed to skip the line. Like, for example, I don't know, a single mother from Guatemala her life was threatened and it was a verified thing, and the police couldn't protect her. And I'm just saying, like, there's these weird stories that you could sort of say the government might say, okay, well, it has to go to my supervisor and their supervisor, and they're going to give you an exemption, but ordinarily we wouldn't grant you asylum here. I'm all for having exceptions to the rule if they're limited, but it's like these guys, they just game the system. They just try to, I don't even know what the heck they're doing. Like what are you doing? Like that and the lying. It's like that all these apartments being taken over in Colorado. Oh, it didn't happen. We got video. We see them going in with a rifle. Oh no, it didn't happen. Right? Like,
Ignore your eyes. Ignore your eyes. Trust the government. We're the eyes.
Right. And then so what do you do if you're just like an ordinary? You're from Mexico. You legally immigrated. You're so happy to have a nice job. There's a future for your family. You get to send a little bit home. You're working hard, and then next thing you know, the gangs and cartels you tried to escape have taken over your apartment building.
Yeah. Yeah.
And everybody's telling you, oh no, it's just that's not true. That's not true. No, you're just a crazy person.
Yeah. And the Americans you tried so hard to assimilate, there's going to be a portion of them that now look at you with that, and like, I don't even blame them, but still it's not fair to the legal migrant that's here, that's working, that wants to be an American, that loves it here in this country, and they work hard and they do what they have to do.
Right.
But just by default, people are now all this did was just, it really made things worse as far as race. Like everything they said, trying under the guise of improving race relations, in almost every single metric, they have made it worse. Where it comes to black-white relations,
Well, I think they wanted that.
Yeah.
I think that was by design. Do you agree with that? Do you think that they
A million percent?
Yeah,
1,000,000%.
So that's that's the
country.
problem, because the culture I came from, grew up in, we don't think of race hardly at all, or we didn't in my age. I'm in my 50s, and then it all came back, right? And so it's like, oh my goodness, everything's race now again.
Well,
and it was there's this 10-year period where no one thought twice about, there was complete intermixing and cultural mixing, and it was good. There was no friction, but that's all gone. That just blew up.
Think about it. Like you with Martin Luther King, and like I think he kind of had a message of unity. I definitely know he was not perfect. He is not the saint that they paint him to be, but God bless him anyway. I think he did tons of good. But the FBI or the CIA did not take him out until if there was this across the aisle thing happening. Same thing with Malcolm X. Again, he Muslim. Very anti-white in the beginning of his ministry. Very anti-white. He was Louis Farrakhan. You talk about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and all this stuff. And a very anti-white. And it was when he did his pilgrimage to Mecca, he came back and realized that, there's all these white people that are actually the same faith. And then, again, now this is, I'm not advocating for the faith of Islam or whatever at all. Yep. But my point is that he definitely opened up his view outside the scope of race. And when he brought that back to the States, that's when they took him out. That's when they took him out. They loved him preaching the anti-white stuff. The minute he got away from it, they took him out.
Yeah, it is weird. Like it's like different agencies profit from the hatred. So it's like again, this is what I find frustrating is that like one-on-one, like I can sit down with a liberal and we get along fine. Like we just agree to disagree.
Yeah.
But then what happens is I run in like this Mrs. there that's at Trump's thing, and it's like, oh my goodness, like seriously, like you're just so evil. I couldn't sit down with you and have a coffee because you're just that bad. And and then people would say, well, Jesus ate with prostitutes. Yeah, but the prostitutes weren't like this. Prostitutes aren't worshiping Satan. They're simply, wayward.
And it wasn't during their shift. They gave it up. You know what I mean? They gave it up.
That's kind of my problem, and I just confess to all of you. So there's a public confession for me, right? Like I have my biases. I admit them, and I try. I admire people of goodwill, and those of you who've known me know that one of the most common things I say is, hey, if you can get me 5 lefties and 5 righties in a room, and I could be the facilitator because I can allow for my bias, and I bet you I could have a whole bunch of neat things sort of solved on paper in a weekend. If we just the right kind of process and the right kind of ground rules, and obviously the right mix of people. But if you got 5 people of goodwill that lean left, 5 people of goodwill that lean right, there's all kinds of neat stuff that can happen if we just stick to issues and stop crapping on one another. But the problem is the minute we get social media or the camera rolling, it's like we're fighting for our own team, right? There's like and if you're just focused on solving the problem, I think that's one of the things that, again, you don't have to agree with Trump's policies. You don't have to you don't have to be conservative. You don't have to be whatever. Right. I think one of the things that's impressive, even if you disagree with him, is just the velocity at which he is trying to solve problems. And even if he is unsuccessful in solving some of these problems, At least he's doing something. Do you know how many
Trying.
decades we have not done anything? USA, oh my goodness, the Department of Education, oh my goodness. This stuff had to be looked at, and no one had the backbone to do it, right? And so it's the same thing with the church. Like, we want people to have the backbone to say the emperor is naked. The emperor is naked. And so, okay, so, and then you say, okay, Lord, now what? Now what? What do you want of me? You know?
Right.
So it's interesting. You know, that's really all I had to sort of vent today. Felix, I don't know if we have any questions or comments, or you want to add some stuff.
Well,
so this week I'm traveling. I have to go to the other coast. So I'm going to have, yeah, absolutely, Victor. So yeah, thank you for that comment. So the gift of free speech is so important, and that means that we have to be willing to hear speech we don't want to hear, right? So that's true. And you know, as long as I would say that again, in certain context, you know, you're not allowed to threaten somebody, right? You're not allowed to threaten their physical safety. So it's proper that we have a limitation or a restriction on speech in that. But you can almost consider that a different category. That's not like a threat. That's not really speech. That's just it's a type of violence. And then there's I would say the other thing is you shouldn't have freedom to give an intentional deceit. So let's say that I believe that if I inject oregano in my veins every morning, that I'm going to be cancer free. And of course, there's no science behind that, and I'm just making that up. Well, there's a big difference between I'm sort of some hippie guy that I really believe it, and whether I'm some evil person that's just selling this to gullible hippie people, right? So,
stockholder of Oregano Incorporated of America,
right?
right.
So, in one sense, so I know it's hard to prove this stuff, but if you don't intend misinformation, like if you don't intend a deceit, then really you should be allowed to say whatever you want, as long as it's not threatening and it does not intend to misinform. It's kind of like the AI rules that YouTube sort of uses. Like, you're allowed to use AI. Like, we can put a I'll tell you guys a story. Some of you know it. There's a clip on YouTube. You can look it up, where the lawyer during COVID, he had to attend a court hearing. Of course, they were doing it all by Zoom. So that's like a video conference. And the lawyer's daughter was playing with his computer. And so what happened was, when they had the hearing, one of the lawyers had a cat head on him. And did you see that, Felix?
No, I didn't see it.
It's pretty funny. We should find that for next week. But anyway,
yeah.
So the thing is that the lawyer's talking to the judge. He says, Your Honor, I'm obviously not a cat. And the cat's mouth is moving and everything, because it's all like AI generated, whatever. And it's like, and everybody's just laughing, tears are in everybody's eyes. Like, it just, you know, it was kind of cute, because it was like, you could tell everybody's like just all stressed about the COVID and all this business. And it was just a sort of some comic relief that this poor guy, because what was really funny is he was trying to turn the cat off and he couldn't do it, right? So the more he tried, the more the cat was looking frustrated on the screen, and it was kind of funny. But
hold on, I actually got it here. Let me put it up.
Okay, yeah, play it. This is funny, guys.
Share.
Turned on.
Oh my God.
Yeah, blow it up. There you go. That's it.
I believe you have a filter turned on in the video settings. You might want to take
we're
a
trying to. Can you hear me, Judge?
I can hear you. I think it's a filter.
It is, and I don't know how to remove it. I've got my assistant here. She's trying to, but I'm prepared to go forward with it. I'm here live. I'm not a cat.
I'm not a cat.
I can see that. I think if you click the
you're not fooling anyone, cat.
That's right. So
I
mean,
fooling anyone, cat.
Yeah.
Right.
So the way that the YouTube rule works, guys, is that, you know, you can use AI, like you could have Felix and I in Superman suits or stuff like that, and that's fine. That's because everybody knows that's just made up, right? But I can't have like President Trump here saying, you know, I can't even do a good imitation. I was going to say, you know, oh, Meikle's so huge, you know, he's so great, he's fantastic. You know, you can't. Even though the technology exists for me to make him sound like he's saying all that, it's not ethical to put that on there unless it's obvious that this was just a joke. right? So I mean, you're allowed. So YouTube has a little tick box when we upload our videos that if we use AI, like Felix's image there is AI generated, right, Felix?
Yep. That's
Yeah.
AI generated.
So I mean, you don't
wish I
have to
looked that cool.
flag. That's an example of something that's you don't have to flag it as AI generated because it's not anything that anyone's going to confuse.
Right.
Like So, but anyway, it's kind of like that. I think that we, if we're going to evolve sort of our understanding of free speech, it's probably a good idea for us to separate like the stuff we get into trouble sometimes is satire or parody. and so maybe you just have to have a little flag, this is a parody account. And, so because unfortunately, people were fact checking the Babylon Bee, which is a satire site.
Right.
And they're saying these conservatives are lying to us. It's like, dude, it's the same with President Trump, right? Again, love him or hate him. He's very hyperbolic.
Yeah.
Right. So that's just sort of his genre. So there's a difference between hyperbole in your style of communication, sort of like going to a wrestling match, right? Versus a football game, right? There's a different genre, a different way of communication. The WWF, the old WWF or whatever they call it now, WWE or whatever, there's a certain exaggeration, a certain hyperbole that everybody's in on the game. We're all in on the game. It's not a lie because we're all in on the game. And it's the same. It's the same with President Trump. He's often very hyperbolic, and that's not a lie if it's your genre. So I can already hear some of my liberal friends say, "Well, that's convenient, you can just but you kind of can tell, right? Like, I mean, if he's saying he's going to put Trump hotels on the moon or stuff like this, he's just joking." Although I said that, and I thought his whole 51st state thing was just a joke, but he keeps bringing it up. So I don't know. I do sort of wonder if he, like, what is he doing? Like, the thing is that, he's got a lot of Canadians angry at him, but I wonder, what I said to somebody, hey, Dale, you know what I said to them? I said, the problem with this age is that people choose comfort first over everything else.
Oof,
and you can just imagine if there was some sort of thing that triggered a strong decline in the Canadian dollar, that if the U.S. offered a 1-for-1 for the U.S. dollar, there's a lot of Canadians that would take that deal and sign over, like would come over. So what I'm getting at is, and this will upset many Canadians, but the fact of the matter is people are going to vote with their belly and their comfort. And it's just a matter of situation. Is it a win for the U.S.? Is it a win for Canada? My own personal prediction is that it's not a win to take the whole country as a 51st state. I think that it's probably a smarter play to either accept certain provinces as territories, sort of like Puerto Rico, and or if you do, then focus on the ones that'll build a land bridge to Alaska, and let the rest of them alone, because all the people that are going to be really hostile, they don't live in Alberta and Saskatchewan. Well, maybe Edmonton and Calgary, but they're going to be in these other provinces.
How buttered is going to be the Liberals? Like, if Trump makes it to the end of 4 years and they now have to redesign like a Trump flag to represent all the new states that are on there, you know what I mean?
Well, it really is a win-win. It really is a win-win for everybody, actually, and for like Canada has some serious demographic problems. And it's funny because people get mad at me, like, don't shoot the messenger. I didn't cause this. Trump didn't cause this. Even Justin Trudeau didn't cause this, as much as I love to blame things on him. They have an anthropological mess coming down that pike. Low fertility, economy mismanaged, and just there's no national vision. So, but I mean, on the plus side, the irony of earnings is that they're discovering a certain level of nationalism over this 51st state challenge. And maybe that's what Trump's grand plan. Maybe he's been playing 6D chess. I don't know. Maybe he just said, I don't really want them as a 51st state, but watch, I'm going to get them thinking nationalistic versus globalist.
So,
yeah, he could do it.
All right. So you mentioned this a couple of times today, and this is kind of going to maybe take us elsewhere here, but the drop in fertility, right? And I was thinking about this, like, is this like a chastisement from God? Is this, because this seems to be worldwide. This isn't just, I think maybe there may be some exceptions, like I think
some African countries.
Yeah, they're doing good.
There's a there was a chart I saw recently, and some African countries still have, but they're slowing their growth. That's true. That's a very good question, Felix. So there's a couple different things. So first of all, I'll give a disclaimer. I am not a medical scientist. I'm not and I'm more interested in physical sciences than biological sciences. So I'm by no means any kind of expert here. And I know that some of our viewers are nurses and doctors, actually, because I have contact with you offline. So feel free to weigh in on the comment here on this stuff, especially if I get something wrong. But my understanding is there's a global issue with testosterone, and there's a whole bunch of different theories on what that is, everything from water supply to food preservatives to just some sort of quirk of our evolution, I guess. So there's that, and then there's combine that with culturally, we discourage in our more industrialized nations, we discourage younger marriage, and we discourage women, to stay home. And, it's a touchy issue because, and then people don't understand too, or they don't realize that just because we talk about something that's sort of a 10,000 foot level, and you say, ideally, women should marry younger and they should have more children. That is not condemning everybody, against their will to some sort of 1950s, or they trot out the Handmaid's Tale and all this kind of stuff. No, what we're saying is that society should create an environment where that is possible if the woman wants it. And we should also culturally encourage it, not demand it, encourage it. And the reason is it's the health for the country. And if it was up to me, if I was emperor, you wouldn't want that, by the way. But if I was emperor, I would say it's simple as you're every woman that has a family and they have them young, then free university, free whatever, up to 6 years university, whatever, at age 30. So that would be this. Basically, you try to get your childbearing in the years that it is more biologically conducive to do it. And all these people get offended at that. Listen, that's just the way we're built, man. It's not anything trying to keep anybody down or oppress anybody, or it's just simply that we don't have the fertility rate to make a healthy society. Something has to be done. You don't want to coerce people or force women to do anything, against their will. By the same token, we can still incentivize the idea of a younger family, and we got to do better at preparing people for marriages too. But that's a whole other can of whoop. There's just a lot of so you get all this, Felix, and then I call it the Japan effect. You got some issues going on, or some people go on about incels and stuff, but I use Japan as an example. Basically, young men are turning to computers and VR to replace what they used to get from women. Pardon to be crude. This is why, I'm going to joke. You guys can make fun of me after, but this is why I say traditional Catholicism has all the answers. Why? Because you're not allowed to amuse yourself, in a self-gratifying manner. So that means if you're going to you have your regular human needs, most people are going to express that in the context of marriage. You get married young because you're not supposed to be doing it outside of marriage.
Right.
You're not supposed to be on the VR or watching nasty stuff on the YouTube or whatever they do. And so it's interesting because you talk to people like this and they say, well, that's not realistic. Well, sure it is. I mean, these things are habits, right? I was horrified. Maybe some of you agree with me. Put it in the comment. I used to be a big Dennis Prager fan. I loved him because I loved PragerU and all this stuff. And then he gets on Matt Fred one day and he goes on about how, all this pornography is wonderful. And all. I don't know if I should have said that word out loud for but no, I would get flagged, right? But no, but he was going on how this is great and all this kind of stuff. And it keeps men faithful. And I'm like, man, are you nuts? Do you realize what this does to the human brain? Like it's a scourge on humanity. It devastates in younger people who get a real connection to the addiction. It messes up with a healthy marriage and courtship, and for married fellas, it messes up the intimacy with their wives. And it's one of these things. Like, it's not about being prudish. It's just it's bad neurochemistry. Don't do it. It's
it lowers testosterone among men.
Absolutely.
You know,
So, I mean, actually, Felix, maybe we answered the question. Maybe our little banner circled back and we did a Jen Psaki and
we circle back to the
discovered
point.
We that maybe actually it's just the easy access to erotic imagery, which might be messing with the chemistry that's in the men. I don't know. Certainly, Japan's got a real problem. Japan's like there's a very high percentage of Japanese men who do not want a girlfriend. Like they don't, they like it used to be years ago. If you were a parent, the parents would be scared that their daughter or son would get carried away in their teenage years and end up, pregnant out of wedlock, and it's going to cause problems and ruin their school and all this. And that was the fear. But now it's weird. In some cultures, you can't get the children to, like, it's the opposite extreme. Now you can't get them interested in one another.
Well,
so it's weird.
If we bring that here, this is the problem, right? Because, like, all right, I'm in agreement with you. Obviously, like, we need more marriages, more families having children, large children, not large families, rather. Many children multiply, and and that would be wonderful. However, I think to get to that point, or even before we even can think about that, there needs to be some serious changes in our current marriage laws. Like no fault divorce, and and again, this might get me in trouble with like
no,
paternity
you're right, but also
like that.
Also, can we realistically afford to have single income families? Right, like it's very difficult for most.
No, yeah.
So I mean, it's a thousand variable problem, and again, I think that the problem is you talk about the stuff, you get all these people screeching at you, thinking that you're trying to take them back to 1920, and that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is, can we get people of goodwill together and say, can we design a society what it would look like if everything worked proper, and then reverse engineer how to get there, and instead of forcing people, just sort of incentivize them a little bit, like Hungary. I think Hungary has some sort of rule: if you have so many kids, you never have to pay tax again.
I'm loving that law, and it's funny that very statistic or that very study was brought up in some podcast I was listening to yesterday, and the problem is that it was like a slight bump. And it's kind of steady declining. Like it didn't do much apparently. I think that because there's more things at play here. Again, like there's what's going on, especially like hypergamy and things like that. You got women chasing like I'm speaking in generalities, so obviously but they're chasing like the top 20% of men, and then you got like 80% of guys here who are just good, decent people, not really getting the attention or the opportunity to meet women, marry, settle down. That's my fresh.
It's a real problem.
Fresh and fit take. Right?
There's a lot of it's interesting. There's a lot of YouTube material for those of you who are interested in the subject. There's a lot of YouTube material from both perspectives, right? Like there's women that favor traditional marriage and they have some insight, and then there's men that favor traditional role that they have insight. Then there's the sort of the jackass male, for lack of a better term, right? So there's that sort of whole manosphere thing, and then there's the liberal view of how dare these guys try to reestablish patriarchy. I guess all I'm getting at is when I look at liberals, I don't see happy people typically. So this is one of the things. I don't shoot the messenger, but if I sit down with one-on-one on this and someone holds to liberal views, 90% of the time, these are not happy people.
No.
And they don't connect that, see, freedom in the Christian understanding is not freedom to do what you want. It's freedom to do the good. And that's a liberating thing. I know it sounds restrictive, but it's a liberating thing.
Mm-hmm.
And society puts so many pressures on us. And it's a very complicated thing, and so you want in a prospective partner to find somebody that is is honest and generous with their time. I'm not just talking about money. It's generous with their time, generous with that they have a certain work ethic, that they're courteous to strangers, and if you get a quality person there, then you won the lottery, because it's harder and harder and harder. Because unfortunately, our social media and our fiction is training people to have very unrealistic views and they're just paths where they're not going to be happy.
Yeah.
You know, so it's tragic, because I mean, obviously you want them to have a life with God, but I mean, they're authors of their own misery. And it's
sometimes God punishes you by giving you giving you exactly what you want. You know, and
well, there's some of that, right? Like, you know,
Yeah.
be careful what you pray for and be careful what you hope for, because you know it's not always in your best interest, and sometimes God allows you to do it, so you fall flat in your face, and he
Pray for God's will.
chastises people he loves, right? So this is where
Yeah.
a lot of people don't understand. Like, sometimes you have somebody that says, you know, Father, why does all this bad stuff happen to me? I work so hard and I love God and I do all this stuff, and you know, why is it that evil people are flourishing and I'm not? And I said, well, there's you got to liberate yourself from a couple things. First of all, yes, you want to seek justice in this life, but also you got to liberate yourself from the expectation that life is fair, because it's typically not. That doesn't mean you don't work for justice. It doesn't mean, you know, but what it does mean is liberate yourself from your expectations, right?
Yeah.
And expect the cross. And then if you happen to have consolations, then that's good. That's bonus. But then you don't feel hard done by, at least, right? Because that's a hard thing for people to navigate out of. If they start getting a chip on their shoulder, and I think most of us have been there. I know I have been in certain points in my life, you know, feeling that, you know, this is unjust and this is whatever. And then, you know, hopefully you grow out of it. I know I grew out of it.
Yeah,
but
same here. Yeah, same here. Yeah, I used to be like on fire for like certain causes, and again, I was a liberal idiot, you know. But yeah, thank God I grew out of it, because even now, if I agree with something on this side of the, I'm not just going to jump in and, you know, like pretend like I'm an expert in anything, or like you know, to like act independently on something I really don't know anything about. You know, like you have to give yourself room to be wrong in the future, because you know, at least in my
Absolutely.
case, you know, every time I look back, it turns out I was wrong. So in some way.
So you know, we opened up with, of course, that horrible clergy person, but you know, one of the stories I'll tell you is too. What happened? Going to a postmodern church, so a Novus Ordo Catholic church. And again, not all Novus Ordo are necessarily postmodern, right? So I want you guys to realize I'm not condemning, you know, painting everybody with the same brush or whatever, but just something that happened. And it was this Jesuit fellow. And right in the middle of Mass, very tall guy, he was a very weird looking guy. He had this great big, almost Santa Claus like beard. And he just, and huge, like not fat, but like really tall, large wingspan. And he just bursts out into song in the middle of the Mass. And he was, did you see that, by the way, Felix? They had their election for the Democrat National Convention, and one of the candidates just sang her answers.
Singing her gospel music. Yeah, it was so.
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
So,
but anyway, this guy was like that. He'd just break into song, and he did a pirouette, and he said, "And the lords and the ladies will dance in the field." And I'm sitting there like, "What is this?" Like you know. So I mean, at a certain point, like some of the stuff is just too crazy, and and so. You know, that and it spills over. The crazy that's in the church is in government, is in bureaucracies, is in the school system, is at the library, is at your local dog catcher. I question the mental health and the philosophical training, the background that kids should have, or people should have, for basic reason. And then it leads, you know, people say, well, why is that important? Well, for one thing, it helps you live a happier life. Like, even if you disagree with me, if you have a framework that you can progress and flourish,
right,
then that's a good thing. And hopefully you address your spiritual, your psychological, and your physical health. And traditional Christianity offers you a roadmap. It offers you a roadmap, and it's not for everybody, but in a certain sense, it is for everybody. But no, what I'm getting at is not everybody's going to say yes to it. But if we're going to save this society, it's got to be returned to Christendom of some form. It can't be, if we try to just make this a secular state that just sort of tolerates religion, if that's the direction, you know what you're going to end up? You're going to end up with Mad Max and Blade Runner. You're not going to end up with your Star Trek future. You're going to end up with Mad Max and Blade Runner.
People eating each other.
Yep.
People eating each other. Yep, absolutely. And Yeah, this gets into the Alex Jones stuff, man, because he said that's what he's saying, especially like when you get into like the old pyramid rituals that were going on in South America and Mexico, back then. He was saying it's like that all happens, and that's what everything leads to, especially when you go down the rabbit hole of like the hallucinogens and the shrooms and the DMT and things like that. You see the little that you see these entities that pull you, that's kind of draw you towards
I'll
that.
stick with my beer, Felix, although I must confess this was the last one in the fridge.
No, I had a little bit of that Crown Royal that apparently I better savor because
Oh, there's not going to be a tariff. No, they paused it all. So I think,
Are you surprised?
No, I'm not. I think you are going to see an evolution. I think what he's planning on doing, and again, you guys can fact check me. You don't have to agree with me. This is totally just me off the cuff, armchair quarterback. I think he's planning maybe a 2.5-3% tariff to everything eventually, and that he's going to try to replace personal income taxes. There'll still be income taxes for corporations, and there'll still be various taxes. But I think he is serious about eliminating income tax and replacing them with certain tariffs. So there's no free lunch. I mean, you're going to pay tax in the form of slightly higher prices, but consumption taxes are more fair. Typically, I mean, not every economist would agree, but I think most economists, certainly Dr. Soul, would agree that consumption taxes are fairer because the rich pay more and the poor pay less. And if you want to give some sort of special assistance to those who are really poor, then that's fine. That's a separate program. But essentially, if you build in those consumption taxes and these tariffs and various things, that people pay money on what they consume.
That's right. But then, hey, what do we got here? We got Cynthia saying taxation is theft.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a great statement and for the discussion. So certainly taxation that is misappropriated for what it's like. For example, so say if they say, we have a 2 cent a gallon tax on gas, and we're going to fix the roads with that. So I would argue that kind of taxation is definitely not fair, and that definitely not theft if they do what they say they're going to do, right? Because that's saying,
that's true.
No, you're using the road. We got to fix the road. Where's the money coming from? We're going to bill the people who use the road. And how do we do that? We bill them through a gas tax. That kind of makes sense. It's a consumption tax that links it to an actual project that has to do with the consumption.
But
so that's a good idea.
Mismanagement, though,
the taxation, I think, where philosophically you could definitely argue that it's complete theft is income and property taxes. These taxes are very hard to justify.
Estate tax,
because they're not. It's first of all, they're not linked with the provision of service from the state, and second of all, the property taxes in particular are so arbitrary because it depends on what your assessment is.
Yep.
So you have no recourse, really, no effective recourse in many jurisdictions. It's like condo boards. It's like I shudder at it, right? These HOAs and these condo boards, if you've got a good one, great. But I've had so many horror stories of friends of mine or acquaintances of mine. They discovered mold in 2 apartments over. So they spent tens of thousands of dollars in this and this and this. And then next thing you know, your condo fee doubles and you're like, but wait a second, I can afford this. Yeah. I didn't vote for this. I didn't say that I bought this condo thinking it's going to be $300 a month. Why is it $700 a month now? How am I supposed to do this?
Right.
So, I mean, there's pluses and minuses to every situation, but that would be my fear with property taxes is that all it takes is for a local municipal government just to say, oh, well, it's worth this. Last year your house is worth $100,000 and you paid, I don't know, $800 tax. And the next year they say it's worth $10 million and now you're paying tens of thousands. It's like, how's that fair?
Right.
Exactly. Right. So it is bizarre. I'm exaggerating. See, I'm being hyperbolic,
but
I'm not lying. I'm not hyperbolic.
Yeah. No, but yeah, I think I'm with you. I think the state tax or the sales tax rather makes the most sense. But where I don't know, it's like, yeah, the taxes that are set aside for the road and set aside for defense and things like that, that's not made, though it's not theft per se. It then goes into mismanagement, and then it goes.
Yeah,
into
there has to be some
nepotism,
linkage to, I think, the service you receive for it not to be theft. So, And
Right,
and the
right.
thing is, the problem is that all Western countries are sort of into this, and it's Trump did something interesting. Again, it's going to make all these people hate him, but he basically said to Ukraine, "Yeah, we're taking your rare earth to pay for all the money we gave you."
Yeah.
Right,
There's
and there's going to be people upset because they're going to say, "Well, poor Ukraine has to rebuild and all this." Well, I don't want to see the Ukrainian people set back, but the other side of it is, look at Gulf War I. We said we were gonna pay for the war with the oil, never took it.
Yeah.
You don't have to take it all. You don't have people stealing, but you got to cost recover. And so I think with the hopefully President Trump and hopefully other politicians, as well on both parties, get away from this endless war stuff. So there's a time when you have to go to war, but I mean, a lot of this stuff is just like, leave it alone.
I just feel like this was done, especially the Ukrainian, the Ukrainian money aid and all this stuff was done in such a rush, and like against the desire of so many people that I actually think might even be the majority. If we took political parties out of it, like I would say the majority of people would rather have this money spent here, But it's like catching somebody who's not supposed to be eating chocolates, right? You walk in and they're, you turn on the light, they're eating a chocolate, and what do? They just start stuffing their mouth before you can get there and take the bowl away. That's what they were doing as far as sending money to Ukraine.
said something really interesting the other day. Like, I don't know what to believe anymore. Maybe a lot of you guys probably are like me. Like, even if I used to, what I used to do is I'd read Breitbart and Huffington Post. I'd read Fox and then like Slate or something. And I would
Right.
deliberately choose two extremes, and then I figured the truth was somewhere in the middle. And that worked for a couple of years, but it doesn't really work anymore. Like, it's very hard to know what to believe. But Zelensky alleges that out of the $200 billion that the U.S. gave him, he's only received like 45 or something like that. Again, I'm fact check me because I just pulling that number out, but it's something like that. And so here's the problem. Well, where's the money?
Right.
Now, if you guys look up Sam Bankman-Fried, there's where some of the money went.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like, where are all these, like the lion's share? Like, we say we're giving them all this help. Well, where is it?
Yeah. There's like
So there's
unaccounted
shady
for.
business going on, So again, love or hate Trump, this is his gift to the world, because it's not just the U.S. Like it's all of the Western countries are going to have to start thinking when they see all the stuff they're uncovering.
Yeah.
They're going to have to say, well, I wonder what our people are doing.
Yeah. Exactly. Right? The slow awakening. And Doge, the gift of Doge, calling out like the mismanagement of money. And it's like a real game changer if we can stick the landing on this. Like, I'm really, again, I'm afraid to get my hopes up because the machine likes to fight back, and God knows what's coming.
Me too, man. But have you noticed that they don't attack the opponents of Doge? Do not attack the process or talk about better audit systems or anything. They just attack the people.
Yeah. They just attack.
So that tells me all I know. Like, this is it. Whenever anybody just comes at me as a person versus the argument, they've lost, right? So this is it, and it happens on at least a weekly basis that someone will fly off the handle at me or anybody that they're opposed with, and it's just it breaks their brain, and then since they can't provide an argument against your points, they just come after you. So it's interesting.
You go ad hominem, it's a wrap. You've pretty much lost.
Yep.
At least conceded your side of the debate. Even if yeah. So what else we got, huh? What else?
Well, that's just it. We got like 7 minutes, and we're ahead of schedule today, and we even had lots of clips. So I don't know if anyone wants to fire off a comment to Felix and I. We sort of ended up a little potpourri towards the end. But I just wanted to get out a good rant at that nasty clergy person, because I just think she hurts all of Christianity and turns it into some sort of leftist thing. And
I gotta say this, actually, I should bring this back up because the right wing, because we're talking about the manosphere, like I'm kind of in a disagreement with you as far as like I wouldn't call some of these red pill people jackasses, and like maybe you have Andrew Tate or Fresh and Fit in mind, or so. I don't know who you think of exactly or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not really that familiar with them. I don't think that. First of all, I think they have a role, actually. So I'm going to get in trouble with people with that too.
Yeah.
I think that it's useful information to hear, so you get a counterbalance to the postmodern narrative. But all I'm saying is a traditional Christian path is not quite in the direction of some of this manosphere. So there's a balance, right?
There is a balance.
So
Correct.
I think one of the things is that, again, it depends on who's consuming the information. Like there's a big difference between a 25-year-old who's one of these sappy romantics, falls in love with the girl at work, gives her like expensive presents and gets his little heart stomped on all the time. That's a very different situation than some guy who's some sort of player, like, trying to, get all these girls. And I mean, it's see, someone who gets his heart stomped on and it's because of just a certain immaturity, he needs some of this insight in male-female attraction so that he can get out of that cycle, and so he can be a good husband to somebody. And you got to sort of toughen them up a little bit, right? But on the other side, you don't want to create these, you expose some of this manosphere stuff to someone too young with the wrong personality type, you're going to create an idiot for life. It's not going to be a good dad or husband.
You create a monster, but
you create a monster.
I'll definitely
so that's
push,
I'll
definitely push back, because it's not just that, because the same situation, if you add to your love-struck child, 25-year-old falls in love, you throw marriage into that equation, and then you throw in a no-fault divorce. It's not just that he gets his heart broken. Half his income, half his money,
everything's gone.
And if there's a child involved, and I can kind of speak to this to a certain degree, because I had I was married way back when, and whatever, it's a big nightmare. But yeah, the thing is this happens a lot now. As far as the womanizing aspect of it, I think that absolutely, there's definitely contrast from like the Christian view or whatnot. But they are like, I'll even say someone old school like Kevin Samuels, rest his soul, he passed away a while ago. But even Andrew Tate and Fresh and Fit, they push actually for the traditional marriage, traditional lifestyle, and they're really pushing for that because, again, they're. You don't have to agree with everything they say, again, like I don't either, but I think they're
I don't consume I'm so out of my subject matter with these guys, because I haven't I've watched clips. I know who Andrew Tate is. I've watched Jordan Peterson on him. I've watched him do his little spiel for 3 or 4 minutes.
Father Miko watching Fresh and Fit clips would be hilarious.
I've seen some of them. Yeah. So there was a young woman. She's sort of a peculiar person. She's like a Novus Ordo Catholic conservative. I don't think she's practicing necessarily, but she's traditionally minded. Hannah Pearl Davis is her name.
Oh, Pearl. Yeah, Pearl. Yeah, Pearl.
Yeah,
I listen to Pearl.
So
she's all right.
She would interview some of these guys, and so I've seen clips, and then in that case, I probably watched like 3 full episodes of her. Like this is like 2 years ago now, but I mean, I find it interesting because she horrifies certain traditional Catholics, but I thought they beat her up. Like Michael Knowles had some sort. I think again, I apologize if it's not Michael Knowles, but some sort of semi-famous.
It was either
Catholic.
him or Matt Walsh. It was one of the two.
Yeah, so those guys are just crapping on her or whatever, and I think they missed the forest for the trees. Like, you're not talking to a theologian, you're not talking to some, uberly devout Catholic. You're talking to a cultural Catholic who's a young woman trying to navigate the craziness that is courting in this era, and she's just traditionally minded, and she has some very strong views, and so I just didn't think they treated her with a lot of respect, and I don't think she did. I don't think they helped our cause. Like, this is the problem. Like, I had people show up to mass where I'm at right now, and so there's a public mass in the residence and once a week, and so there were people that came that I hadn't met before, and they were talking to one of the other priests, and I happened to go by, and the following phrase was that it was this elderly gentleman, and he says, the traditional Catholics are their own worst enemy. And it's so true. Like, in so many things, like, we got to watch ourselves, because what happens is that whoever beat up Hannah or Pearl or whatever she goes by, no offense to her, I just get confused. But whoever was doing this sort of badgering her, they're puffing out their chest, feeling also superior. The 40-year-old guy beats the 25-year-old woman, right? Like in an intellectual argument, she doesn't have any philosophy. She doesn't have any, all this stuff, which these guys have, right?
Yeah.
And they're used to interviewing and they're used to all this. So of course she's going to look like an idiot. And I just thought to myself, you guys have missed a real opportunity here, because instead of bringing her along and her audience along to a new way of thinking, a new frame, the only thing you were concerned about is being more theologically correct and more smart.
Yeah.
And that's, so guys, that the law of the salvation of souls is the primary mission, right? Like as far as this kind of thing. So you gotta, it's great. Like Catholic Twitter, same thing. There's people get all apologetic. Every once in a while, I slap somebody around a little bit. I did like 2 or 3 days ago. If any of you follow my Twitter, it's like I nuked this guy from orbit because he said something stupid. Like again, I don't mind if you have a difference of opinion, but this guy was misrepresenting St. Patrick and St. Augustine.
Yeah.
And he was lying or he was completely ignorant. But one way or the other, it was untrue. And so another Catholic friend corrected this guy and then I let loose on him. And I just said, this is the problem. I have Protestant friends. We agree to disagree. There's no problem. But in your case, you're being intellectually dishonest. You're misrepresenting the writings of saints and you know better and it's wrong. So how are we supposed to say, I think you're of God if you intentionally distort truth, right? Yeah. So I sort of went up one side and down the other but then the thought occurred to me, it's like, again, I don't regret it because if you do something like that that's dishonest, you deserve to be called out. But the man, it's like it's so hard sometimes, right? Because you want to get the souls to heaven. You want to bring these people over, and just because you win the argument, that sometimes doesn't do that, right? Like, so you've got to sort of shift gears. There's a time and a place for the argument, and there's a time and a place to help people reframe stuff so they can understand what you're trying to teach them.
Sure.
And it's not so important that you just score points. So you want to read Mega Man? Good evening, Mega Man. It's great you're closing us out tonight.
Yeah. All right. So it says, Mega Man Return says, men must be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. Yeah, man. You know what? I want to do such a politically incorrect thing to Mega Man. I want that clip of Elizabeth Warren doing the VR. Yeah. Yeah. You're gonna get everybody shrieking at you, Mega Man. That's not very synodal or environmental of you. Man. I bet you have an air conditioner, you selfish Mega Man. You're it's true, right? Like so. All of creation has its role and its order, and we are to subdue and store the earth, and that doesn't mean that we turn everything into a heavy metal like mercury and stuff that we ruin everything. Right. But it does mean that these environmentalists that will shut off hundreds of thousands of gallons of water because of a smelt, like I'm sorry, the smelt serves man, we don't serve the smelt. Yeah. All right. You guys can quote me. I've got the whole state of California can protest Bishop Meikle. That Meikle says that the smelt serves man. Yeah. Right. That's that. Now listen. This is what's crazy. Even if you're an evolutionist, right? Which I'm not. I'm a strict creationist, traditional to sense. But 99, either or, 99% of the species extinct. They've gone extinct. And there's so many that go extinct every day, right? Like, it's an unreal number. Like I can't remember on the top of my head, but it's like, to worry about one when you lose like 30,000 a day or whatever it is, no one wants to lose right whales or dolphins or honeybees, but if a particular the spotted cockroach goes extinct, I don't really care. Right? Yeah, I don't care. Right. All right. So Mega Man Returns comes back with the idea that men must be fruitful, increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Seemed to be a talking point of the far right. Yeah. That's absolutely it. When we see a low testosterone level happening biologically across men, that in a way it makes you wonder if there's not some sort of chastisement, because you're right. A symbol of Old Testament understanding of being a blessed man and blessed family was lots of kids, so and the problem is our social structures often discourage large families,
You know, even
Yeah,
taking a bunch of
exactly.
kids to the Space Center or something like that. I mean, you'd think that they would charge for a parking spot and make their money that way. Oh no, it's per kid. So if you get a large family, you know, a large family can't afford to go to the Space Center because you know, there's just it's too expensive. You know, so it's especially with a government funded thing that's just kind of weird. Like charge for the parking spot, you problem solved. You know, but
Yeah, right.
but there's little policies like that. You know, when you think about it, there's little things we could be doing to encourage that larger families could function better. And but smarter people than me, they're going to figure that one out. And they're going to do it without a Department of Education. We hope and pray.
Yeah.
They got a little shot in there. Little shot in
I
there, guys.
know.
Yeah, little shot in there
Please.
against the.
Is that
I'm
too
all for
much to ask
education.
for?
I'm just not for teachers
Department
unions
of
and the
Education.
Borg.
That yeah, that's led to like the absolute midwintery among the entire country
Right.
now. They're coming out of schools. This
Yeah.
is yeah.
I got a
they've been
teachers
absolute
union
failure.
story for you. So my dad, and we got to wrap up. I'm getting one more time tonight. I got a big trip tomorrow early in the morning.
Oh, okay.
But my dad was a school teacher his whole adult life, and he became an educational administrator. You know, got promoted, and at a certain point in the particular place where he served, you could remain sort of like an honorary member of the union. Like you no longer had to pay the dues, but if you wanted to, you get to go to the meetings and the conferences and stuff. You just didn't. I don't think you got to vote because now you were technically management, but they try to keep it sort of like a professional association as well as a union.
Yeah.
And yeah, he had all his fights. You know, as he got promoted, his life was miserable because of these unions. And why? He would try to get rid of a molester teacher, and the union would defend the molester.
Oh,
and as he said, it's like, you know what? We're supposed to be a professional association. You're supposed to help me get rid of the bad ones. You know,
right? You would think.
So that's what we got to do in the church. We got to do with the government. We've got to start culling the herd. You know, get the ones that are mean and bad apples, get rid of them, right? So, you know, so thank all of you for your prayers and for what you do to try to restore sanity to this world. You know, and your prayers matter. Your morning offerings matter. Their treasure in heaven. Your evening examens matter. Their treasure in heaven. So I'll invite you to pray with Felix and I right now in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. God, our Father, creator of all things, we praise and thank you for your gifts. We thank you for this time we've had together. Help us discern the good and false teacher by the fruit, as you taught us to do. In other words, the content of the teaching. Help us to see the world and ourselves and the church as you wish us to see. And may Almighty God bless us, Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Amen. I wish you all a good evening. You're all wonderful. And I'm certainly praying for you this week. And pray for me because I've got a long day of driving. I think I've got like 9 hours in a car tomorrow, both ways. It's just trying to schedule so nuts, trying to thread these things that I got to do. You know, I go from 6 to 11 most days. So it's going to be a long old day tomorrow. And I'm going to try not to fall asleep tomorrow morning in the car.
Oh God, please.
So God love you, and I'll see you next week.
God bless you all, guys. Good night.